My name is Marcia Robinson, and we are recording an oral history with Judith Stewart as part of the Sweet MUMories Oral History Project. This project marks the 50th anniversary of the Miami University Middletown, Ohio campus. This interview is taking place on May 3rd, 2017 at the Gardner Harvey Library. Ms. Stewart, do I have your consent to proceed with this interview?
Yes, you have my consent.
So can you tell us about your first connection with Miami University?
Well, my first connection with Miami University was right after I started working with Armco in 1964 and hearing about, the Holiday House being given to the campus and the Armco Girls turning the title over to the campus, because when Armco first donated the campus, they didn't realize that the title was actually in the Armco Girls' name. And so anyway, I just heard talk about that, but it was an exciting time because we were going to have a higher education right here at our back door, and also Armco was going to help us pay for our education, which was wonderful for us.
Okay, well, let's talk about what that surprise was like. Let's talk about life before there was a campus. You're from this area, from Middletown and nearby?
I'm from Jacksonburg, and it's a little town 6 miles west of Middletown. That's where I grew up. I was born in Middletown, but my grandfather and my grandmother raised me, and I used to come to Armco Park because my grandfather worked there. He was a security. He was the head of security. He was sergeant of the guards, and so at summertime he got to be the person who was security for the park, which was a fun job for him, and really fun for us because we would bring lunch to him, and then we could picnic, and I could play on the swings, which those huge swings were just up on the hill, were terrifying and they were fun. But they also had these rides, and my favorite ride was the leapfrogs.
What's a leapfrog ride like?
A leapfrog ride was actually these green frogs in a circle, and they just moved up and down and leaped like this. And we, as small children, we just loved them.
Did you ever go to an Easter egg hunt here?
I did go to an Easter egg hunt, and actually, I guess I can tell you this, I was the Easter Bunny one year, but I have pictures of that, But long before that, when I was young, yes, my grandfather would bring me out when they had the Easter egg hunts,
Oh, that sounds like fun. So you came to work for Armco Steel. Can you tell us about becoming an employee of Armco?
Well, back in 1964, I graduated from high school. I was only 17 when I graduated, but they let me come to work because my grandfather took me in the door and said, "Here, interview her, hire her," And it's just the way it was back then. It was a family business. It was a family company, and family was really, really important back then. And so 9 times out of 10, if you had family there, you wound up getting hired there. And but for females, it was a little different, I think. They, asked questions. They could ask questions that they couldn't ask today, I'm sure. But it was, I was just so excited to have a job, and my grandfather had always taught me to work early. He would go to work an hour and a half early, so but I started out in teletype. Now, what's teletype? I know probably no one much younger than me can even remember what teletype is, but that they would send wires. I mean, and there was this ticker tape that would come out of the wall, and then we'd put it in this little machine, and it would print out these typed messages from someone. And we could get messages from all over the world. It's almost like computers today, only it was a really odd, old, antiquated form of an email today, basically.
Could you tell us about some of the countries that Armco Steel was doing business in?
Armco Steel did a lot of business, and it was called the American Rolling Mill Company way back then. And we did a lot of business all over the world, in South America, in France, in Germany. I'm trying to remember where else, but we had plants, and we also had offices, sales offices all over the world.
So tell us about your career. How did your career go?
Well, like I said, I started out in teletype, and then I left to have my first son. I come back, and I wound up back in teletype just for a little while, and then they were putting a new computer, a new type of teletype system in that was more, it wasn't computerized yet, but it was much more modern. And so they asked me to go up to the sales service department so that I could help implement the teletype system up there. And because I just typed really good, and I just learned all of this so easily. So I went into cell service, and I was into cell service for about a year, and we did order entry, and I taught people how to use the machines and that kind of thing. And then I left to have another child. And then I came back into I'm trying to remember. Oh, I came back into the typing pool, and they were, at the time, they were typing new benefit booklets, and there was new legal things that new laws had just come out, and they had to type up all these books on all the benefits, and I was a fast typist, and I didn't make many mistakes. They sat in front of your machine and actually counted your mistakes and how many words a minute you typed, everything, and they put it up on a board. How many errors, your error rate was mine was like 0.001%, and how many words a minute you could type and that kind of thing. So someone from what they called personnel back then came down one day, and he was the vice president, and he wanted to meet JJ. That was my initials back then, and everybody called me JJ. And so he said, well, I'd like to interview you and talk to you. So he talked to me, and he said, well, we would like for you to just come into the personnel department and get into benefits. And so because I could type so well, and I came into work early, I worked hard, I was always asking people for things to do, that I actually typed the executives' paychecks and their W-2s, and me and two other people in a company were the only ones that knew what they made. So, and then I was an insurance clerk also, and I kept asking my boss for more work to do because I just kept getting bored. So he said, well, I'm going to give you something that's going to keep you busy the rest of your life, and it's going to take you 2 years to learn it. And I said, being young and foolish, I said, it's never taken me more than 2 weeks to learn anything. So, oh my gosh, what a blow to my ego. He put me into pensions, and the pension department dealing with all of the retirees from all over the world. We had international retirees, we had retirees in California and Houston and Kansas City, Baltimore, all over the place. And they all had different types of pension plans because of the different unions and different contracts. And I mean, we even had pensions for the Manchester Inn people here in Middletown. It was a totally different plan, you know. So it took me 2 years to, I never quit learning. And so, and that was about the time that I started going to college and realizing that, you know, I needed an education to further my career. And so I was so excited to come to MUM. I was so excited because I had had a scholarship to OSU, and my grandparents I heard them arguing and figuring out what in the heck they would do if to pay for my housing and books, and I thought they had done enough for me anyway, so I didn't go to OSU. So I had this opportunity to come to MUM, and I was just thrilled. It was just wonderful. And it was hard because I was working nights. I mean, I was going to school at nights, and I had 2 small children, and I wasn't married at that time. After I had gotten divorced. So I'm working, and had this children, you know. And then my career I started getting promotions in the benefits department, and I wasn't a supervisor yet. They didn't have many women supervisors back then, but I was what they called an advisor, and had actually people reporting to me and dealing with all the retirees that were out there, plus the people who were retiring and the pensions at all the different plants. And then we started shutting down plants.
So the factory in general, I think in the 1980s and the 70s, steel industry started going downhill in the United States. What was that like? Well, it did inside?
Not. The steel industry didn't really start going downhill until like the late 70s. Okay. Things were kind of booming and pretty good in the late 60s and early 70s, but then it started going downhill around in the late 70s. And the first plant that we sold, well, there was one old plant that I can't even remember the name of, but the first one that I really was involved in was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Sand Springs, Oklahoma, close to Tulsa. And we sold that plant, but it was very devastating to these people because they were Armco people. They were Armco, and our Armco was a family company and so wonderful to work for. And so I went down to Sand Springs, to Oklahoma, and had to explain to them what was going to happen to their benefits. Back then it wasn't a 401k plan, it was called a savings and vacation plan is what they called it. And then what was going to happen with their pensions and with their insurance benefits. And it was I sat across from people and just cried right along with them because they were, they felt they were losing their jobs with Armco, and they didn't know they had the unknown of what this new company was going to do, and no one was there telling them anything. So it was very difficult. So then we started shutting down plants where people had no jobs to speak it with any company. The companies weren't buying them. A lot of the plants just got totally shut down and tore down in Houston. Houston Works plant, the Ambridge, Pennsylvania plant, the Kansas City, now one of the Kansas City plants, the Union Wire Rope, it was sold. And the coal mines were sold. But the
coal
people,
mines?
Mm-hmm, We had coal mines. And then, of course, the Manchester was sold, which those were the Manchester we owned, the Manchester Hotel. And we sold that, and all those people, lost their jobs and their benefits with us. But I think the worst ones were the ones that actually totally, I sat down at Houston and saw them. I'm sitting in an office, and the plant out there, these big jaws were just tearing down this plant, totally tearing it down, and it was really sad. And a lot of those people, some of them couldn't even write. I have them sign their pension paperwork and with X's, and then have to initial it. And most of them got their jobs from their families. Walking in the door, their dad would walk them in, and they'd take their test, somebody would read it to them, it was really a tough time. And we started in 79, and in 80 we had 65,000 employees. And by 89, there were about 6,000 with the limited partnership, which the Armco Kawasaki plant split off from corporate. And then corporate still had about 3,000, plus their, plus the Butler Works that they kept, and the other plants that they kept at Zanesville. And research, I think they wound up having about 5,000 employees at that time too. So we went, in 10 years, we went from 65,000 to about 10,000.
Did we lose any jobs here in Middletown at that time?
We lost some jobs here in Middletown. The Hamilton plant was shut down, which that was in Hamilton. And then there was, I can't remember the name of it. There was a plant here in Middletown, a part of a plant that, part of the Middletown Works, a section of it that was also shut down.
Do you know if any of those employees came to the Middletown campus for retraining?
Some of the employees came to the Middletown Works for retraining and for
Middletown
jobs.
Campus?
Middletown campus. Yes. Let's get back to Miami University, because I know that we had, they had some training programs, outplacement training is what they called it. And I'm not sure what, I know we had a company that helped with that, and I think that there was some partnership with Miami University for outplacement training too, and that was a whole different section from what I was involved in, because I was involved in the benefits part of it, but I know that they did have training for retraining for a lot of the people at various campuses and companies. Yes.
I'd like to continue the story of your career, because at some point it started going global, or there was a lot of more travel. Is this the time period? Within my career, the travel started when we started shutting down all these plants. And then right after most of the plants were shut down or sold or outsourced, there was a lot of outsourcing to the metal products division was outsourced to employee group and that kind of thing. But during that travel time, I could not go to night school. I transferred all my credits and everything to College of Mount St. Joe's to go to a weekend college, because you only had to go every other weekend. But if you missed one weekend, then you didn't get your credits. And so I got put into negotiations with unions,
And I wound up in Pittsburgh for 21 days straight with negotiations. You can't leave. You have to, you're like sequestered, sequestered. You're there for 21 days and you can't leave. So anyway, after I shut down all those plants, and about that time in 1989 was when we split, the company split, and corporate went to New Jersey. And I had the choice, I actually had the choice of going with corporate and staying with the corporate part of benefits, or going to the limited partnership. And the limited partnership side did not have a benefits department at all, a corporate benefits department. They had them at the plants, at Ashland Works and at Middletown Works, a department, a benefits department. But then the corporate department was actually going to corporate. So they said, they wanted to promote me and give me the opportunity to actually set up a whole new department, a whole corporate department for the new limited partnership. And so I wasn't promoted to manager. I was just made what they called a left-handed supervisor versus a right-handed supervisor. Now that's a right-handed supervisor, you were benefits supervisor, so the word supervisor was after. And then a left-handed supervisor was supposed to be higher up, so I was supervisor of the department. And they brought in a salesman into the benefits department to be the manager. And he was a real nice guy, great person, and I just taught him everything I could teach him, but he hated it. He hated benefits, and he got a job offer for another company. And when he got that job offer, he went to the vice president and said, Judy should be manager of this department. That you guys need to make her manager because she's been running it for me, and God bless him, because they did. They gave me the management position in as a right-handed manager, but still manager, But at that point, I was, I still didn't have my degree, and I just felt fortunate that somebody recognized my talents, and I really still wanted to get that degree, But being everything with the new LP, limited partnership, everything was changing constantly. I mean, we had a new vice president of our department probably every 9 to 11 months. It was just kind of a crazy time. So one of the Japanese men reported to me, and he was a really nice person. He hardly spoke English. We wrote things down sometimes, and we talked about food a lot. It was funny, because he would ask me, if I'd ever eaten certain, squid or something, and, or sushi and that kind of thing. And I asked him if he ever ate frog legs or rattlesnake. We'd gross each other out. But anyway, his superior, basically vice president, was coming in from Japan. And he was so excited. He said, so he's teaching me how to introduce myself to his superior. And so every day I would go in and he would say, Judy, what do you say? And I say, Hajimemashita, Hajimemashita. That means pleased to meet you in Japanese. And so his superior came in, and he was so excited he brought him back into my office, and I said Hajimemashita first because he wanted me to be the first to say it before his superior did. And so I said Hajimemashita Judy Stewart Doe, and he introduced himself, and then the young man that was reporting to me says, "Oh, my two bosses. She my boss, you my boss." And the other guy goes, "Oh, she your boss?" He just could not believe that the other young man was reporting to a woman. So, but anyway, that's a funny story as a part of our experience with the other owners of our company. And but we had, I think, good relationships, and it was really sad when all of them had to leave. But when we became AK Steel, and you have to understand, all during this time, everything was changing. We were looking at benefits. We were costs were, oh my goodness, our company was really in trouble at that time, and so we had to look at a lot of costs and how to, save money on benefits, on anything, So we were looking at new types of pension plans, 401k issues, anything that we could to save money and save the company. And then, well, we got through it, and we started making money, and things started turning around. But I wound up. I stayed at corporate until 1999, and my heart was always kind of at the Middletown Works, so I wound up transferring out there as the manager of the benefits out there, and I really loved it. So that was mostly my career. I retired in 2009, and had a nice long career. But I tell you, it was hard. It was all hard work, really hard work. And I would tell anyone, even with the good college education, that first of all, you start at the bottom. You have to start at the bottom and work your way up. And by doing that, you learn so many other things that it's easy to be a supervisor or manager over people too, because the people really respected the fact that I had gone through the ranks and learned everything and knew what they were going through. And I lost my train of thought.
Well, I'd like to take the train back to the phrase you said, you knew what people were going through. Can we talk about being a non-traditional student and being on a campus that had other non-traditional students? What was that like at the time when you were here?
Being a non-traditional student versus going to college like most people have the fortune to do is sometimes I felt a little like an outsider, only a little disconnected from some of the other students that were full-time students. But for the most part, the campus itself, everyone was friendly. Everyone gave us, that made me feel welcome, and made me feel a part of the classes. And the other students did too, I believe. It wasn't easy though, and it wasn't easy going at night and working all day and getting the studies in that most people have the opportunity to have more time to do. But I got really good grades. never really had any problem as far as the grades. I learned a lot, but it's possible for anybody to do, you know. I would say that if you can't go the college route as far as, you know, for money reasons or personal reasons, whatever reason, then at least going to the night school and getting an education is the most important thing.
I'd like to go back a little bit earlier than your school days. I'd like to go back to being a female employee at Armco, because there was something called Armco Girls, which I find phenomenal. So tell us about Armco Girls, if you don't mind.
Yeah, in 1964, starting out, I was really shocked to find out they had a Armco Girls organization, and right away I heard about the Armco Girls. I was included. I don't know that. I think it was. I started in September, and I think there was a overnighter in the girls' clubhouse, is what we called it back then. Probably in November, and I was invited to. Of course, all of us were invited, but I signed up to go. But the thing about the Armco Girls, first of all, it was very important for us women back then, because we didn't have the career opportunities, I don't believe, at that time that the men did. And you know, the men had their own camaraderie and the things that they all did together, and the management clubs and this and that and the baseball, and so it was something for us women to encourage each other, and it was very we always encouraged each other. And if you've seen a copy of the Armcoette, which was our newsletter, our news magazine that was put out every month, and it told us how to dress at work, how to act at work.
Can you give us examples?
Well, we had, there were always pictures in the Armcoette, in the magazine, of what women should wear and how many inches below the knee the dresses should be, and just what, and you know, how, and there were things about home too to help us with, like there were recipes for cooking, and there was tips for cleaning and doing things around the home, and but there was a lot of things about what to do in the office and how to act. I don't know.
It would be difficult, I think, for our students to imagine those kinds of rules now. So I heard that there was a Miss Armco pageant, even though there were rules on heels, how high your shoes could be, but there's also a Miss Armco pageant. So what was that?
Oh my goodness. We had what we called a jamboree every year. And it was a big carnival, basically, and to raise money, because the Armco Girls, we had a scholarship fund, and we also gave money to the Doty House, what they called the Doty House back then, which was, has turned into Abilities First today. But at the Jamboree, we would also have a Miss Armco contest. And it was almost like Miss America, okay? There was usually, probably about 20 women in the whole pageant. and they had a formal category where they came out in their formals, where they came out in their swimming suits, talent contest, and just an all-around, just like in the Miss America pageant. And then Miss Armco was crowned for the year. So.
Were these women single?
No, not all single. Not all of them had to be single. They could be married.
Wow. Were men invited to the pageant?
Yes.
And so these women were in bathing suits on a weekend, and then Monday they go to work. What happens at work? Any cat calls or anything?
Oh, sure. There were always, after the pageant, there were always comments in the hallway and people saying, oh, I saw you in that. But now the bathing suits had to be one-piece suits. I mean, there were no bikinis or anything like that. They had to be tasteful.
Okay.
Not. But still, on Monday morning after the jamboree, there was usually, a few remarks or cat calls or things, oh, I saw you.
Well, I'd like to stay with the Holiday House and talk about the request to transfer that property to a university. That sounds like a big sacrifice. How did that go over? What was the emotion at the house? When
I first started that in 1964, it was just like right after that actually Logan Johnston, who was the president at that time, the CEO of Armco at that time, had announced that Armco was giving all of this property to Miami University Middletown campus, and to start a MUM campus, which was unheard of before. We'd never even heard of that, a branch campus anywhere. I think it was the first in Ohio anyway. But I think the story was that I heard when I first got hired on was that Mr. Johnson made this big announcement and everything and gave all the property to Miami University. And when they went to switch the title over, they discovered that the Armco women, Armco Girls, had the title to the Holiday House, yes, it was the Holiday House at that time. And so management went to the Armco Girls board and said, we need to talk about this title. And what they agreed upon was that they would build a new house for the Armco Girls down in what we used to call Bunny Hollow. And that's where the leapfrogs were and a lot of picnic tables, and that's where everybody gathered mostly in this park anyway. But so they agreed to build us a new clubhouse, basically. And and that's what they did. They built, and we had then we had a Holiday House committee, the Armco Girls did, who decided what the house was going to look like, what they were going to have in the house, the furniture, everything.
Is it still standing?
The Holiday House is still standing, but it isn't the Holiday House anymore. I believe that Miami has it now.
The Verity Lodge.
It's the Verity Lodge.
And then
No.
The replacement building?
The replacement building. Yeah. Okay. The old Holiday House became the Verity Lodge.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't explain all of that. Okay. Once we built our new Holiday House down in Bunny Hollow, the old Holiday House then became Verity Lodge. And I know for a fact in 1968, Calvin Verity and his wife handed the keys over to Miami University to the Verity Lodge. And then once Armco tore down their general offices down on Curtis Street, the Verity statue of George M. Verity was brought up here to Verity Lodge.
Now, for the town to lose an amusement park and to lose the Holiday House, when you move forward a few years to say 1968 or 1970, and suddenly women are getting an education, how did that feel?
It was wonderful. Even though we did lose this property, it was being built. Something was being built that gave women in this area an opportunity to advance their careers astronomically. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I knew, other than myself, who took advantage of going to night school, getting their degrees, and some even went on to get master's degrees, and it was wonderful. And you saw advancement in the women's careers in Armco, I think, as a result of this campus.
Did you bring your children to campus for babysitting?
No.
You did not use that program. Okay. Let me see. I'm so impressed with the story that you've told us so far. There is something that you can tell us about someone, Evelyn Day.
Oh, definitely.
Can you tell us about Evelyn Day?
I can. Evelyn Day was secretary to Mr. Charles, I believe, and but she was part of this whole Miami University thing. She was on the committee with management during the whole Miami University process, I think as part of the Armco Girls, but and as a representative for the Armco Girls. But Evelyn, she loved education, and she promoted education. I know she was happy that I came to the university. I remember that now. And she always sent me notes when I got promoted or when something in my career changed. She would just send me a little note of encouragement, and she sent me a book, a poem book, and I cannot remember the author now to save me, but I still have it. Actually, I just saw it the other day on my bookshelf, and I thought of Evelyn and how encouraging she always was to me and all the women in the organization. She just, everyone loved her. But I can't tell you a whole lot more about her. I can't remember, to tell you the truth.
Did she have a favorite designer for clothing?
I don't remember.
Okay. Now,
probably it might be in one of our Armco ads, to tell you the truth.
Okay, we'll take a look.
Her name is in some of them. I'll look through the rest of them.
I'd appreciate
She's in there.
That. I would really appreciate that. Did you also know Ruby Widener?
Oh, I loved Ruby Widener. She loved me to the very day she died. She was just a wonderful person. She helped Bill Verity so much. She helped him write his memoirs. He just depended on her for so many different things, and she took care of a lot of his personal business, you know. But she too was so encouraging. She was just one of these people that made you feel like you were the most important person in the room when she was there, you know, when you were there. And I just can't say enough sweet things about her. I just loved her. When she was working with Bill, I know a lot of times when I was president of Armco Women, which I became president of Armco Women years later in 1979, 80, 81, she was so much help to me and gave me access to Mr. Verity when I needed access to him with, you know, things that were going on. And actually, he, in 1982, when we had our very last jamboree, and that was the very last one, Bill was Secretary of Commerce at the time, and Ruby helped me get in touch with him because I wanted to know if he would donate a Ruthven print. The John Ruthven prints were very popular in this area, and Bill Verity had actually had John Ruthven do a print. It was called Decoy, and he did the original went to Khrushchev, and Bill Verity took it to him in Russia. And some of the other prints, I can't remember how many, it was 200 printed or something like that, went to the senators and, you know, dignitaries, and of course Ronald Reagan got one. So, anyway, Ruby helped me get in touch with Bill, and Bill donated one of those. She called me and she said, Bill wants you to come down to the office, he's in today. And I went down there, and he gave me that print to auction off for the jamboree, for our last jamboree. Yeah. And he wound up giving me one too. Just.
One of the interesting things about Middletown is its diversity. Could you speak to diversity in women in the workforce at Armco?
Yes, I can. The diversity with women in Armco back in even the early 60s. I had an African American friend in my department. I'll never forget her, and we always had a good time together. I never saw any of the racial issues at all in the Armco women. Armco women were Armco women. We were all the same. So
were there women of Hispanic heritage or just African American?
I don't ever remember any Hispanics, no.
And were women of color welcome, and did they come to the Holiday House?
The women of color came to the Holiday House. They, as a matter of fact, I think I still have, I have a picture of some of the women that were in the 1968 Armco Girls Miss Armco contest, and one of them is a woman of color. We had what they called, we had style shows out in the Holiday House, and there were all colors in the style shows. Everyone was represented, everyone was included that wanted to be included. And it was always, we were always just the Armco girls.
What classes did you take at MUM?
I took the classes I took at MUM were, I loved psychology. I think I took every psychology class I could as a freshman, non-whatever, but I took music appreciation. I took English, of course. I took psychology. Oh, I'm trying to remember what they called it now. It was computer something. I took a computer course, you know. But
do you remember any of your teachers? You can use teachers' names.
Gosh, no.
Okay. Any homework assignments
That's
that you remember?
I can remember in psychology doing a paper on gosh. I remember this paper that I did because I used my husband as one of the one of the subjects, and because he worked in the mill, and it was what motivated someone, a blue collar worker, to do a good job when all they had to do was get their seniority in, you know, and versus a person who gets a college education or goes, you know, the white collar route, and what motivated them versus the blue collar worker. And I think I loved that, doing that paper. I got an A on it, but that was just one of the most interesting things I think I did when I was studying.
You mentioned that at some of the plants you were closing, some of the workers could not sign their name. Did that occur here in Middletown ever?
Yes, those workers in the mill, both here in Middletown and Houston, and Kansas City, Baltimore, Ambridge, everywhere I went, there were a few workers who were not educated, who just signed their names with X's. And we also had some who were from other countries who could not even read English a few times.
Here in Middletown?
Uh-huh.
What countries?
We had one in particular from Italy that I remember that still spoke Italian and hardly spoke English. But
Okay.
yeah, we had a diverse group of employees too.
So when a college opened up, what did that mean about opportunity for the children of such workers to have a college in Middletown?
For those individuals who, especially those who weren't educated, to have their children have the opportunity to go to a local campus, and they could afford something they could afford. Because I think that most the people, especially, you know, the folks in the mill, felt that education was beyond the grasp of their children. A lot of them did, and I think sometimes my grandfather felt that way too. But to have a local campus that was affordable, and, you know, if they worked at any of the corporations in the area, a lot of the corporations did the tuition reimbursement. And so if you were working, that's how I paid for mine. Mine was tuition reimbursement. I was reimbursed my tuition after I passed a class, you know. So that was wonderful. Just an opportunity for anybody in the community.
Is there anything else that you would like to make sure that people know?
I can't think of anything else, seriously.
If you could talk to the planning committee that was organizing this campus, and these are people you may know, probably know, you already said so. What would you tell them about what became of their dream of a campus?
Oh, if I could talk to those people who actually sat down and and made this whole thing happen. I would just say kudos. I mean, I don't think they even imagined the fact that so many people's lives could be changed with the opportunity of having a campus. And I look around, I mean, I know my granddaughter went here while she was in high school. And she's at OSU now, and she is just, and my grandson's going here while he's in high school. The opportunity for these kids in high school to have this campus right here and be able to take some college courses and have that go towards their college expenses and for their future is just, I don't think anyone thought that back then. I don't think they ever dreamed that that type of opportunity would be there for the children in this area. And I think it's just wonderful.